Bright Suns travelers, wanted to make a brief video as an addendum to my setup video on how to configure your Black Spire Sabers enhanced blade controller blade to provide some troubleshooting tips. It just occurred to me from a question from a fellow who just purchased one, who ran into his first problem, and I hadn't made any video or anything like that showing the process for kind of doing some resets and doing some troubleshooting. First and foremost, as it goes with any Sabbies or Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Legacy hilts, batteries, that's usually of the 4 possible problems, that's usually 3 of them, right? So again, one of the things that I do is I don't use the standard battery packs like these. I don't use these. I use some battery packs provided by a seller on Etsy who makes like a USB rechargeable battery pack, and you can get double capacity in it, and it lasts much longer than these do, and doesn't run into some of the problems as regular batteries die. They drop in voltage by quite a bit, and the changing of blade colors and the turning on and off and things like that has to happen for the blade controller to work can stress out the batteries, especially when they're low, and cause some really odd performance. Most notably, usually things like the hilt ignites but the blade doesn't, or the blade won't retain settings correctly, or sometimes the blade will just be turned on and then turn off, and that's usually batteries. 90% of the time it's batteries, but in the event that you did need to reset or wanted to reset your blade controller, this will essentially be the process here. So we have a blade in now. It is configured to be white with an effect. Okay, we'll start with that. You'll notice it's making the green sound, not obviously the white sound, but we're beyond that. So in the event that you had a problem with the blade where it just wasn't performing right, wasn't doing what you expect it to do, either not igniting or otherwise stuck, the process to do a manual reset of the blade, there are two options to do the manual reset. First option is going to be rapidly powering on and off the hilt with the blade connected, leaving the blade connected, leaving the power off, and it'll reset itself. So what'll happen is you'll turn it on and off. You'll hear a disconnect button as if you were disconnecting the blade, but you're not going to disconnect the blade. Leave it powered off. Then you'll hear a reconnect button, and essentially that is factory reset of the board of the controller here, right? It's going to go all the way back to whatever its saved settings state was. Okay, so I'll show you that process here. Okay, so let's say it's difficult to replicate, but let's say the blade is not igniting and I need to reset it, right? So I'm going to rapidly power on and off the hilt. Okay, I hear the disconnect sound. I leave it turned off. Okay, you hear the reconnect sound. It turns back on, and we're back to green. Okay, color might not be coming through very well, but it's green. Okay, so that is basically step 1 for doing a reset. The other thing that can happen too is if you turn your saber off, you immediately disconnect the blade, the processor in there needs a second or two to write to itself, and you can kind of interrupt that write phase by having the processor is still in high power mode, is draining those capacitors pretty quickly, and it can cause problems. You can get yourself into like a stuck state like that. So that would be the first method to kind of clear that out. The second method is actually a little more simpler than that, because it is a physical reset. Let me turn my light on here so you can see. All right. Okay, so you'll see here on the bottom of the blade, bear with me just a minute. I'm going to see if I can get this thing to manually focus for me. No. Okay, so you see here on the bottom of the blade, there's 3 contacts. Okay, there's the data, and then these 2 here are ground and battery plus, or voltage. So to force a reset, what you're going to do is just take something metallic. I use my pliers. You can use a paper clip. You can use anything, as long as you're not going to push too hard or damage anything there. And the voltages here are very low, so it's not like you're going to do any physical permanent damage or anything like that, right, by doing this. So essentially what you're going to do is you're just going to bridge those 2 connections. Okay, that's going to discharge those capacitors all the way, and it's going to allow the board to go back to the very low, the no power state, basically. And then it'll also reset that controller. Let me turn my light back off. Okay, and then we'll go back in. Okay, and we're back to stock green settings. Right, and it's going to take the effects just like it normally would. Okay, so those are basically the 2 options. Like I said, first and foremost, check the batteries. Secondly, definitely take a look at the rapidly turning it on and off. It helps to reset things. And then if that doesn't work, you can unplug, ground it out, and it'll also reset at that point as well. The other thing that I've seen happen sometimes too is I just unplug it, leave it unplugged sitting on my workbench for 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, and it seems to be fine after that. I have played with these things enough to where I've really tried to like duplicate all the problems I could think of that someone might run into. I've even removed the battery while the blade's ignited and seeing what that does, and 99% of the time it's just fine. But in case you run into that 1%, this video will help you out. Till the Spires.